In 2014, a team of geneticists published a discovery in PLOS Genetics that would completely rewrite our understanding of African history. They found something impossible hidden in Somali DNA, a genetic signature that diverged from all other human populations 23,000 years ago. Let me put that in perspective. This split happened before the invention of agriculture, before the Egyptian pyramids, before written language even existed. Modern Somalis carry approximately 60% East African ancestry and 40% West Eurasian ancestry. But here's where it gets strange. This Eurasian DNA doesn't match any population alive today. Not modern Arabs, not Egyptians, not even populations from the Levant. Scientists call this the Ethio-Somali ancestral component, and then according to research published in Scientific Reports in 2020, it's completely unique to the Horn of Africa. But the real shock came from Y chromosome studies. In 2005, researcher Juan Sanchez and his team published findings in the European Journal of Human Genetics that 77.6% of Somali males carry haplogroup E3b1, specifically the cluster gamma variant. This is the highest frequency of this marker ever recorded in any population on Earth. To understand what this means, we need to go back 23,000 years, to a time when the Sahara Desert was a green savanna, and a mysterious group of people made a journey that would change Africa forever. 4,500 years ago, Queen Hatshepsut of Egypt organized the most ambitious trading expedition in ancient history. Her destination? Say a legendary kingdom called Punt, a place so wealthy and mysterious that Egyptians called it Tanetjer, the land of the gods. The temple walls at Deir el-Bahari still show the treasures Egypt received: gold, frankincense, myrrh, ebony, ivory, and something extraordinary: live incense trees with their roots still wrapped in soil. For over a century and a half, archaeologists searched the world for Punt. They looked in Yemen, Sudan, Eritrea, but they found nothing conclusive. Then in 2020, primatologist Nathaniel Dominy and his team published a breakthrough study in the journal eLife. They analyzed mummified baboons from Egyptian temples using oxygen isotope analysis and strontium ratios from their tooth enamel. The results were definitive. These sacred baboons came from modern-day Somalia, Ethiopia, and Eritrea. But the DNA evidence went even deeper. In 2013, Somali archaeologist Ahmed Ibrahim Awale led excavations at Gol Warabe in northwestern Somalia. His team unearthed statues, bronze artifacts, and ceremonial objects bearing striking similarities to ancient Egyptian designs. The linguistic evidence is equally compelling. Ancient Egyptian used the word hez to mean song or singing with musical instruments. In modern Somali, hez means exactly the same thing. The ancient Somali name for their region was Bun. Egyptians recorded it as Pwenet or Pwene. Here's the twist that changes everything. Hatshepsut's temple inscriptions claim that her divine mother came from Punt. Not that Egypt conquered Punt, that Egyptian royalty had Puntite ancestry. But if Punt was Somalia, and this connection existed 4,500 years ago, well, why does Somali DNA carry genetic markers from 20,000 years before Punt even existed? The answer is hidden in caves that predate civilization itself. Near the city of Hargeisa in northwestern Somalia lies the Laas Geel cave complex. Inside are some of the oldest rock paintings ever discovered in Africa, dating back between 5,000 and 12,000 years. These aren't crude stick figures. They show domesticated cattle with elaborate ceremonial decorations, wild animals, and human figures in sophisticated dress. This level of cultural complexity existed here thousands of years before the Egyptian pyramids were built, but archaeologists discovered something they still can't explain. Beneath each painting are inscriptions in an ancient writing system that no one has been able to decipher. 100 kilometers to the east, the Dambalin caves contain paintings from 5,000 years ago showing hunters on horseback, one of the earliest known depictions of horse domestication in Africa. Genetic and archaeological evidence confirms that Somalis domesticated the camel somewhere between 3000 and 2000 BCE, then spread this technology to Egypt and across North Africa. Scattered across Somalia are structures that rival ancient Egypt: the Wargard Wall, ancient pyramids, elaborate stone tombs, and the ruins of sophisticated cities. These weren't primitive nomads. These were builders, astronomers, and long-distance traders with their own writing system. But their DNA tells us something astonishing. These people came from somewhere outside Africa, and then their descendants never left. To understand how this happened, and we need to travel back 23,000 years to one of the most dramatic climate shifts in human history. 23,000 years ago, Earth was emerging from the last glacial maximum, the peak of the last ice age. While glaciers still covered northern Europe and Asia, something remarkable was happening in North Africa. The Sahara Desert didn't exist. Instead, it was a vast green savanna with rivers, lakes, and abundant wildlife. According to the landmark 2014 study by Hodgson and colleagues in PLOS Genetics, this is when the Ethio-Somali ancestral component diverged from all other Eurasian populations. Not 4,000 years ago, not 10,000 years ago, 23,000 years ago, in the pre-agricultural period. These weren't refugees fleeing war or famine. They were Neolithic Near Eastern pastoralists following their herds across a green corridor that would later become the Sahara Desert. The genetic proof is irrefutable. These ancient migrants didn't carry the Arabian lactase persistence gene, which only arose 4,000 years ago. This confirms they arrived before the Bronze Age, before Arabian populations even existed in their modern form. Archaeological and paleoclimate data published by Hodgson's team shows the migration split into two branches. One group moved west across North Africa, eventually becoming the ancestors of Berber and Maghrebi populations. The other turned south into the Horn of Africa. Modern Somalis carry a specific genetic variant called SLC24A5, a mutation associated with lighter skin pigmentation that originated in West Asia. But crucially, the Somali version is ancient, not from recent Arab trade contact. Here's what makes this extraordinary. These migrants didn't simply replace the indigenous African population. They merged with hunter-gatherers already living in the Horn of Africa, creating a genetic combination that exists nowhere else on Earth. Both the African ancestry, called Ethiopic, and the non-African ancestry, the Ethio-Somali component, are significantly differentiated from all neighboring populations, both African and non-African. But 4,000 years later, something happened that would reshape Somali genetics again. A second wave of DNA entered Somalia, and this time, the Y chromosome evidence is unmistakable. 75.1% of Somali men carry the E3b1 cluster gamma lineage, specifically the EM78 subclade. Outside the Horn of Africa, this marker appears in less than 0.04% of the global population. According to Sanchez and colleagues' 2005 study, genetic dating places this expansion between 4,000 and 5,000 years ago, originating from an initial male population of approximately 1,037 individuals. This wasn't gradual population growth. This was a founder effect, a rapid expansion from a small migrating group. Research by Cruciani, published in 2007, traced this EM78 lineage to its source, Lower Nubia, the region between southern Egypt and northern Sudan, approximately 9,600 years ago. From there, it exploded southward into Ethiopia and Somalia. This migration coincides perfectly with the spread of Cushitic languages, part of the Afro-Asiatic language family that includes ancient Egyptian, Hebrew, and Arabic. But there's a second Y chromosome signature in Somali DNA. 10.4% of Somali males carry haplogroup T, formerly classified as K2. This is a West Asian lineage found in ancient Levantine populations and, interestingly, in the ancestry of historical figures like Thomas Jefferson. The complete picture of Somali male ancestry breaks down to approximately 80% African E3b1, 15% Eurasian lineages, including T, J, and R, and 5% sub-Saharan African markers. Here's the crucial detail. Somali DNA shows zero connection to West African Bantu lineages. Despite Somalia's location on the African continent, Somalis are genetically closer to ancient Egyptians and Ethiopians than to populations in Kenya or Tanzania. But if Somali men carry warrior DNA from ancient Egypt and Nubia, and what about Somali women? What does their mitochondrial DNA reveal? Mitochondrial DNA, inherited exclusively through the maternal line, tells a different story than the Y chromosome. Somali maternal lineages are dominated by haplogroup M, a marker unique to East Africa and South Asia, along with various N derivatives including pre-HV, L3, and U6. Unlike the Y DNA pattern showing external male migration, Somali women's DNA reveals deep indigenous African roots. The men came from outside Africa, but the women were already here. 20% of Somalis carry the M1 haplogroup. According to published research, M1 originated in East Africa approximately 24,000 years ago, spread northward to Egypt, then returned to Somalia, creating what geneticists call a genetic echo. Somali oral tradition speaks of the legendary ancestor Sama'ale, who united the clans. Remarkably, genetic data confirms a population bottleneck around 1200 years ago, matching this traditional timeline. The complete absence of Bantu mitochondrial DNA proves that Somalis did not mix with the great southern African Bantu migrations. They remained genetically isolated through geography, culture, and their pastoralist lifestyle. However, there's an intriguing detail in coastal Somali populations, a small but significant presence of Indian and Southeast Asian mitochondrial markers. This is genetic evidence of ancient Indian Ocean trade networks dating back over 2,000 years. This brings us to one of the most puzzling questions in population genetics. With all this ancient diversity, all these different ancestral sources, why do modern genetic studies describe Somalis as remarkably homogeneous? In 2020, researchers published a comprehensive genome-wide study in Scientific Reports analyzing 95 unrelated individuals from northeastern Somalia. The results were unprecedented. They found near-perfect genetic homogeneity across the entire Somali population, something never observed in other African populations. To understand how unusual this is, consider this measurement. Somali haplotype diversity scores 0.9575 compared to 0.9974 in European populations and 0.9996 in Asian populations. Somalis have remained genetically stable for millennia through three mechanisms: geographic isolation in the Horn of Africa, cultural endogamy with marriage primarily within clan structures, and recent founder effects from population expansions originating from small groups. But this genetic isolation has medical consequences. The same 2020 study identified that Somalis have the highest frequency of type 1 diabetes predisposing HLA-DR-DQ haplotypes ever recorded in any population worldwide. They also carry the highest frequencies of the UGT1A4*2 pharmacogenetic variant affecting how the body metabolizes certain medications. Here's the shocking reality. Despite 30 million Somalis worldwide, genetic testing companies have virtually no Somali reference data. Somalis are completely absent from the 1,000 Genomes Project, the world's largest public catalog of human genetic variation. This means when Somalis take commercial DNA tests like 23andMe, the algorithms don't recognize their unique genetic signature, or so they get misclassified as Ethiopian, Eritrean, or Middle Eastern. But there's one more secret hidden in Somali DNA, a connection to the very first humans who left Africa 70,000 years ago and then returned. In 2015, researchers published a groundbreaking study in the journal Science. They had successfully sequenced ancient DNA from a 4,500-year-old skeleton found in a cave in southwestern Ethiopia. They named him Mota. Mota's genome was revolutionary because it represented something that no longer exists: pure pre-migration African DNA. He carried zero Eurasian ancestry, no Neanderthal genes, and no variants associated with light skin pigmentation. He was genetically identical to Africans before any back migration from Eurasia occurred. When researchers compared Maternal DNA to modern Horn of Africa populations, they could calculate the exact percentage of non-African ancestry. Modern Somalis carry approximately 40% Ethio-Somali, which is West Eurasian, and 60% Ethiopic, which is indigenous African. But the Ethio-Somali component isn't related to modern Arabs or modern Egyptians. According to research by Molinaro and colleagues published in 2019, it's most similar to Anatolian Neolithic farmers, populations related to ancient Tunisian Jews. Let that sink in. The Eurasian ancestors of modern Somalis were more closely related to ancient farmers from Turkey than to any Middle Eastern population alive today. The timeline is clear. This back-to-Africa migration occurred between 12,000 and 23,000 years ago, before agriculture was invented in 10,000 BCE, before the Egyptian pyramids in 2600 BCE, which before humans had developed written language. These weren't traders or Bronze Age conquerors. They were Paleolithic hunter-gatherers following game across a green Sahara corridor. Research has also revealed that modern West African populations like the Yoruba and Mbuti carry between 0.2 and 0.7% Neanderthal DNA, genetic traces from this same Eurasian back migration. Somalis likely carry similar amounts. The population that returned to Africa may have been outside the continent for 40,000 years or more, accumulating genetic variants from Levantine, Anatolian, and even Caucasian populations before returning. But this raises a question that scientists still debate. If this migration happened 23,000 years ago, why do Somalis still look phenotypically different from other African populations today? Craniofacial studies show that Somalis cluster between East African and North African populations. According to anthropologist C. Loring Brace's research published in Clines and Clusters vs. Race, Somalis show closer skull similarities to ancient Upper Egyptians, specifically the Badarian culture, than to Bantu populations. Somalis tend to have longer, narrower skulls, higher nasal bridges, and lighter average skin tones than neighboring populations. All of these traits are linked to the ancient SLC24A5 gene variant inherited from the Eurasian migration. But this creates a classification problem. Outdated race science sometimes labeled Somalis as Caucasoid, yet genetically they're 60% African. So what are they? The answer lies in language and culture as much as genetics. Somalis speak Somali, a Cushitic language within the Afroasiatic family, the same family that includes Hebrew, Arabic, Berber, and ancient Egyptian. Linguistic evidence suggests that Proto-Afroasiatic may have originated in the Horn of Africa between 12,000 and 18,000 years ago. This means the Ethio-Somali migrants might have carried this language family out of Africa during the original exodus 70,000 years ago, then brought an evolved version back 23,000 years ago. This creates an identity paradox in the modern world. Somalis in the diaspora constantly face questions. Are you Arab? Are you black? Commercial DNA tests tell them they're 40% Middle Eastern, which isn't accurate. It's 40% ancient Ethio-Somali, which is completely different. In 2008, some geneticists proposed the term Somalid to describe this unique anthropological category, a population that doesn't fit Western racial classifications. Somali DNA proves they are both African and Eurasian, and simultaneously neither in the way those categories are commonly understood. But the story isn't over. Right now, archaeologists in Somaliland are making discoveries that could prove everything we've discussed. In January 2025, archaeologist Isaac Yusuf of Somaliland's archaeology organization made an announcement that could rewrite history. His team discovered an ancient map that, after 8 months of analysis, revealed the location of a hidden underground city, complete with pyramids and stone structures buried beneath modern Somaliland. According to Yusuf's statement to local media, "We believe it was the administrative and spiritual center of Punt. This discovery places Somaliland at the heart of ancient global trade and culture. If verified, this would be the first physical proof of Punt's exact location, the legendary land of the gods that Egyptians traded with for over 2,000 years. Additional sites at Ao Barkadal and the Naso Hablud Mountains have yielded artifacts with inscriptions that researchers believe may reference ancient religious or prophetic figures who traveled through the region. If Punt is confirmed as Somalia, it would prove that the Ethio-Somali genetic migration created both the biological and cultural foundation for one of history's most mysterious kingdoms. But there's a crisis. Somaliland currently has no comprehensive archaeological protection laws. Priceless artifacts are at risk of looting or destruction. The excavation continues. The genetic evidence is undeniable, but one question remains. Were the people of Punt the ancestors of modern Somalis, or are modern Somalis the last surviving descendants of an ancient Puntite civilization? Every Somali alive today is a living time capsule, carrying genetic markers from multiple ancient sources. Approximately 60% indigenous African hunter-gatherers, 40% Neolithic Near Eastern migrants, ancient Egyptian and Nubian pastoralists carrying the EM78 lineage, Levantine and Anatolian farmer ancestry, and traces of Indian Ocean traders spanning 2 millennia. The questions that remain are profound. Why did the Ethio-Somali migrants choose the Horn of Africa 23,000 years ago when they could have settled anywhere along the green Sahara corridor? What happened to the pure indigenous African populations they merged with? Did they vanish, or do their descendants survive in isolated groups? Could the undeciphered inscriptions at La Skeel hold the actual origin story of this merger, written by the people who lived it? Scientists estimate that 99.9% of all human genetic variation exists in Africa. Yet Somalis, one population of 30 million, hold a genetic combination found nowhere else on Earth. Modern projects like SomaliY.com are now building the first comprehensive Somali genetic database using whole genome sequencing and Y chromosome analysis. For Somalis in the diaspora asking, "Saying, who am I?" Your DNA provides an answer. You are the children of two worlds, the bridge between Africa and Eurasia, the keepers of a 23,000-year journey, the possible descendants of Punt, the land of the gods. Your genetic signature survived the rise and fall of empires, the greening and death of the Sahara, the birth of agriculture, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, and the modern era. You are, quite literally, a people who walked out of Africa, became something new, walked back, and then refused to leave. That is why Somali DNA is so unique, because it remembers everything.